Come closer. Let the world outside fade away. You have walked the cold, rain-slicked cobbles of Dunwall before. You know the story of the royal protector, the fallen empress, and the vengeance that followed. But tonight, we are not looking at the high towers or the grand palaces. Tonight, we are stepping into the quiet spaces beneath them. We are taking a different path, one that follows the weary, forgotten souls standing watch in the damp fog while the city rotted around them. Consider this a rare glimpse into the margins of a world you know so well. So, adjust your headphones, lean back, settle into the dark, and let yourself get comfortable. If you find a strange sort of comfort in these grim corners, and if you wish to see more stories pulled from the void, take a quiet moment to leave a like on this video. It is a small gesture, but it lets the shadows know you are listening. But for now, close your eyes, take a deep, slow breath, and let yourself drift away into the industrial night. The dark lies on your chest like a wet coat. The barracks breathe and cough around you. Sour whale oil from the hall lamp, damp wool at your chin, iron cot chill creeping up through the mattress. You stay still. Moving breaks what little warmth you own. Men sleep in fragments here. Rasps, thin whistles, wet catching in the throat. A whole room full of lungs trying not to cough but failing, because coughing makes the plague feel present, and guilt feel useful. Your blanket scratches like sand, your bread shows grey freckles, your jellied eels wobble in mean little pools of brine. Your blade wobbles too, old steel, old neglect. The watch calls this order: balanced ledgers, fair rations, sufficient kit, you know better. Officers eat whale meat and drink TV and wine under clean lamp glass, while men like you chew mould and thank the city for leaving you teeth. Rain smears the window. Beyond it, lamplight shivers on the street. Then something crosses the roof line. Lean, quiet, there and not there. A shift of air. A whoosh too soft to trust. The back of your neck goes cold. That's how Dunwall warns you. You think of the ghost with the mask, the rumours from the watch, the twisted metal face, the heavy clack-click of metal unfolding somewhere in the dark. You think of Dunwall Tower, polished floors, sweet lilies, the day Empress Jessamine Kaldwin passed close enough for even the tapestries to seem alert. Then the whispers, the copper taste, the ruin after. They said, Corvo Atar no, broke everything. You watched him taken in chains and thought men like that did not fall. Dunwall teaches otherwise. Sleep creeps close anyway. The hall lamp hisses, someone mutters into wool, a cot rope sighs. You rest your hand on your scabbard and let the dark carry a little of your weight. The barracks is flooded with the coughs of guards who spend too much time in the rain. Infectious, deep and painful barks flood your ears. You try your best to tune them out, sometimes getting a half-second of sleep, but your mind never stops listening, each one sending your half-dream into a nightmare. Memories come back, smells and sounds that you never hoped you would hear again, slip into your mind like a rat burrowing into a weeper, relentless. Then the flooded district returns, not in memory, in smell first, rot, wet timber, fish scales, sour mud. You are there again with your boots sinking in silt and grief, with fog pressing down like a lid over leaning houses, and stair rails polished by hands that are no longer hands, water laps at doorways, iron rusts into lace, flies stitch the air. Behind boarded windows people still speak, not words but groans from weepers, accompanied with the incessant buzzing from endless amounts of flies. You swear you can still see some humanity within the weeper's eyes. Your duty was body disposal. The city calls it sanitary work, refuse handling, cooperation, clean words for foul labour. On the ground it is bundles slick with seep and lamp tar. Bodies tied into shapes the watch can stack without looking too closely. You learn not to step on faces you cannot see. You learn not to let your fingers read too much through the cloth. You learn mercy is a word with its back broken. The choffer coughs and a choffer dies, cheap and spiteful, feeding smoke low across the lane. Whale oil stings your nose. Rats test the heap in thin black lines. The river gnaws softly at the quay. Your job was sanitary duty, loading bodies from the ships into the emptied ports and quays of the flooded district. You thought any one of them could have been your siblings, or parents. Corpses wrapped in white sheets, no face, no name, no semblance of anything human. Tossed away, let go from the responsibilities of the city, further feeding the dark underbelly of Dunwall. Then a polished boot slips from the pile. The leather is still black, still proud, a little piece of rank refusing to rot. Something bumps wood with a soft domestic tap, like a spoon against a cup, and the sound lodges under your ribs. An officer tells you to keep working. You keep working, because in Dunwall, revulsion changes nothing, and obedience at least lets the hour end. A board creaks near your bunk. The district drains away. You are back in the barracks. 2 cots down, a comrade sits hunched in the dark, shoulders twitching, breath catching. You know him. Shipyard wrists, good back once. Now he shakes like a window in bad weather. You sit beside him and show him your empty hand first. In this city, a hand in the dark is a blade until proven otherwise. His voice takes time to light, then it spills. He was sent back there. The flooded district. More bodies. More ruined lanes. He speaks of men throwing corpses instead of placing them, because gentleness would require thought, and thought would split them open. He speaks of a slope of dead that shifted underfoot like a tired beast. Then he says it, quietly, to the floorboards more than to you. How can someone do that? Diminish life as if it was nothing, he said. You say nothing at first, because you did it too. Hours of throwing bodies in the flooded district, just because someone said so, with any one of them being your own family. Maybe your friends, people who you knew before deployment. From that moment on, a deep cough would all but guarantee that your time is ending. The plague coming to drag you back to the flooded district. Guilt here does not stab. It settles. It soaks into the coat. You stare at your boots and think how many things in Dunwall are held together only by cracking leather and habit. So you give him what little can be given. Nearness, breath, a voice kept low and dull so it will not cut him further. No abbey sermon, no false remedy. Only the truth worn plain. The flooded district is where the city stores its worst thoughts, and men learn to throw bodies when stopping to feel would destroy them faster than plague. You do not tell him your hands remember the weight. You do not tell him the flies still live in your ears when the room is quiet. You do not tell him the back of your neck never warms any more. Both of you look to the rain-streaked pane. Somewhere beyond it, a rooftop waits for a face to lean from the dark. Somewhere above the city, wailers and ghosts and rumours pass from slate to slate, while common men sit in bunks and hope not to be chosen. You rest your hand on your scabbard. He steadies by degrees. That is all the mercy the hour allows. Then morning breaks the room open, not with light, with violence. The floor jumps, men curse softly, buckles click, a belt plate skitters between cots like a rat. Cold air slips under your shirt, and the whale oil sting in the corridor sharpens until you can taste it on your gums. You drag on half armour, stiff with old sweat and bad stitching. The straps resist, then submit. Around you, the barracks becomes a machine of tired men assembling themselves. Leather whispers, iron knocks, breath fogs, wool rasps. No one wants to speak first. The first words of a day can sour the whole thing, An officer does that for you. 5 minutes. Dress, move, mess hall, patrols to be assigned. You think poker in the canteen would have been better than sleep. At least laughter has edges you can see coming. A man won an ear there once. No one talks about whose. You file into the hall with the others. Damp sleeves brush damp sleeves. Someone touches your arm in passing, just enough to say we are both still here. It nearly feels kind. The mess greets you with greasy heat and the blue hiss of whale oil lamps. Condensation beads on the windows. Mud prints smear the floorboards. Tin bowls ring against tables. Broth the colour of river water steams in shallow sighs. Bread sits in dense hacked lumps. Eels wobble in pale jelly. Insult pretending to be breakfast. 2 kinds of men live in this room. The hollow ones sit over their bowls as if staring might make food more honest. Their spoons orbit slowly. Their eyes drift somewhere beyond the steam. They look as though sleep has thinned them from the inside. Then there are the others, the crooked ones. The men whose low laughter always means a door will be forced somewhere before dusk. They gather where the lamp smokes least, voices tucked close, planning Gaff Street with the calm care of craftsmen. A woman near the distillery district, a shutter fixed with wire, silver in a flour tin. They speak of her like a root, not a person. You keep your eyes on your broth, but you hear every word. You remember some of them from earlier winter, straighter backs, cleaner hopes, men who once might have handed back the wrong change or let a frightened boy run home. Dunwall sands that off, season by season, hunger by hunger. Now they speak of levies and civic duty, as if theft becomes lawful when a bluecoat says it slowly. You tell yourself you are not like them, not proudly, more like prayer than certainty. An officer passes with men carrying polished pistols and better swords. Orders drift after him. Rivergate, Dunwall Tower, alleys by the distillery. Keep watch for a nameless face where no face should be, for rooftop movement, for the brush of air that comes without wind. You breathe whale oil and salt. You think of stories that move faster than plague, the masked assassin. At the far bench, the plan for Gaff Street closes like a fist. You do not intervene. Not because it is right, because this is Dunwall and speeches feed no one, and a lone honest word in the wrong room only gives crueler men a target. So you finish your broth after it has gone cold. You chew brick-heavy bread. You file away what you heard like evidence no one will ever ask for. Then the room rises with you. Bowls stacked, benches scraping, boots grinding mud deeper into the boards. Posts are assigned by smell before they are named. The river gate with its rope tar and dead fish. The road toward Dunwall Tower with its expensive stone and upper garden air hiding under soot. The distillery lanes where yeast and rot mix into something almost like bread if you lie to yourself. You check your straps. Ritual more than need. The warmth of the mess falls away the moment you near the door. The corridor draught kisses the back of your neck, cold, precise, familiar as a threat. Outside, the day waits in a grey wash of rainlight and smoke. Your shoulders take its weight without asking whether they should. Then, from somewhere beyond the yard, the plague wagon begins its measured iron clatter over cobbles. The sound runs straight through your chest, one turn of the wheel after another, like counting down to something the city has already decided. You step into the grey with the others, toward duty, toward Dunwall, toward whatever shadow has been measuring the back of your neck since before dawn. You stand where the distillery district draws narrow and mean, the stones slick under your boots, the walls close enough to feel like they are listening. The wall of light at your back sings its thin blue note into your bones, steady as a fever, and the wet street ahead keeps slipping in and out of that whale oil glow as if the night itself were breathing through bad lungs. Pipes sweat down the brick. Loose cables tap and whisper overhead. Dunwall never lets old stone die cleanly. It drives iron through it, threads copper through the wounds, and calls the result progress. Above you, the corpse rail begins its complaint. You hear it in the iron first, a low strain, then the grainy clatter of burdened wheels, and when you lift your eyes, the carriage comes through the fog like some heavy metal insect hunched on the rail. No grace in it, only weight, slatted sides, grease-dark housings biting the steel, a machine made to move the dead high above the living, so the city can pretend the two are separate. It passes with that long scraping cry that seems to skate under the skin. Something pale shows through the seams inside. A hand, perhaps, a boot sole, a shape too slight to have belonged to a man well fed even before the plague found him. Then the smell reaches you, a little late as always, as if the air resists its duty. Rot, damp cloth, sweet old blood, the close-wet reek of bodies packed too tight in metal. It drifts through coal soot, through sour mash, through standing drain stink, and rules over all of it for one stretched moment. You breathe shallowly, then deeper, despite yourself. That is one of the city's crueler lessons. To live in Dunwall, some part of it has to get inside you. You think of the barracks and the shipyard man sitting 2 cots over with his shoulders ticking in the dark, speaking of the flooded district as if the words themselves might stain him. Out here, under the rail, you understand him too well. The dead are not even granted stillness. They are sorted, loaded, and sent over the poorest roofs in the city like industrial waste. The upper wards do not smell this. The polished doors and tall lamps do not stand beneath the dripping seams. The burden always passes over the districts already bent by it. The poor must breathe their own ending. Another carriage grinds through, then another. The repetition wears on you more than the first shock. There is something obscene in rhythm when it belongs to death. Your shoulders ache under damp wool and leather. Your standard blade hangs at your side with its old weary pull. The helmet leaves a sore line across your brow. The cloth at your throat feels too tight, and when you swallow you feel the swallow catch halfway, as if even your own body has begun to mistrust the dark. The cold settles at the back of your neck again. That is where fear lives now, not in thoughts, not first, in flesh. A draught touches the nape and your shoulders rise without permission. Your fingers stiffen inside your gloves. Your jaw locks until your teeth begin to throb. You tell yourself not to look up too quickly, and then you do it anyway, your eyes skimming rooflines, ledges, chimneys, balconies broad enough for boots. There are paths up there, slate, pipe, sill, outcropping, all the little ways a man or something like a man might move unseen above a street-posted guard who can only watch one angle at a time. Sometimes the wind presses through the lane and seems to carry more than fog, a hush of displaced air, a shift too light to name. Your breath stops for a beat, then returns all at once, too loud in your own ears. Your hand does not go to the sword. It freezes halfway there and rests against the scabbard instead, fingers trembling once before they settle. You would rather look foolish in stillness than die reaching for steel too late. Farther off, coughing threads through the district. A shutter knocks loose against its frame. Somewhere behind drawn curtains a whale oil lamp burns with that metallic sour scent, always on the verge of smoke. The abbey speaks of sin as if it were cleanly marked. Dunwall is not clean in anything. It marks people in the lungs, in the nerves, in the way a man learns to pause before every shadow, as if shadow might become intention. You make yourself watch the next carriage pass. You watch the seams drip. You watch the iron frame fade toward the river route, toward the waterlogged reaches where the city lets its evidence gather. Something in you goes still then, though it is not peace. It is endurance emptied of pride. You are here to stand beneath the dead and keep order among the living, and both tasks feel lost before the shift has properly found its shape. Then another watchman enters the street, He comes through the blue wash of the wall of light with the easy looseness of a man who has been in bad places long enough to mistake numbness for strength. His coat hangs poorly. Damp shines on his shoulders. He is not an officer, which makes him worse somehow. A polished brute belongs to another class of rot. This one is closer to you, near enough to make the difference feel like a warning. He falls in beside you and brings his own foul weather with him. Stale sweat, cheap spirits in the pores, wet leather, old tobacco, and beneath it something sweet and grave wrong that tells its own story. He does not greet you. His silence has the texture of performance. He wants witness more than company. From his pocket he draws a silver watch and turns it once in his palm, letting the blue light strike it. Still running, still ticking. You do not need to ask where it came from. Your stomach hardens around the answer. He shows a ring next, then another, one bent slightly out of true as if tugged from a finger already stiffening. You say nothing. The lack of words stretches between you, and you feel how badly he wants you to break it for him, with envy, with laughter, with some small joining in. Your throat tightens instead. When he glances at you waiting, your face has already gone still in that dangerous way fear can make it still. Not calm. Locked. Your mouth feels slow and bloodless, your tongue too thick for speech. Even if you wish to answer, you would have to force the sound out past a chest that has drawn itself tight as wire, so you let him perform into silence. The disgust in you is not hot. It is cold and heavy, settling by degrees. This is what the watch does to men when there is no one left to shame them, and no breath left in the city for decency. Not a grand fall. A ring here, a joke there. A citizen turned inconvenience. A plague cart turned opportunity. It would be easier to hate him if he were wholly unlike you. He is not. He is only another man steeped too long in Dunwall, with the human edge worn down until all that remains is appetite and habit. He draws out one thing more, a small carved object, pale as old bone, its shape awkward in the dark. Not silver, not anything common. The moment it catches the light, a tremor runs along your forearms beneath the sleeves. Fine hairs rise. The wall of light hums. The corpse rail groans in the distance. Cables whisper overhead. Yet this little thing seems to hold its own faint murmur under all of it, as though it remembers a different kind of listening. You wish he would put it away. Your eyes want to leave it, but they do not. The thing resists a clean glance. Not ugly in any simple sense, worse than ugly. Familiar in the wrong way, like a shape from a fever you can almost recall. The void rises into your thoughts before you can stop it, not in sermon words, not as abbey doctrine, only as one of those hush names that lives in the city no matter how many white masks condemn it. He pockets it at last. Only then do you feel your shoulders drop, and the release itself frightens you. You had not known how high they had climbed. Your hands have gone damp in the gloves. One thumb will not stop twitching against the seam. You curl it into your fist until the knuckle aches. He lingers near you after that, shaping himself into a companion you did not ask for. There is boasting in the set of him, though little actual speech. You can feel the stories pressing behind his teeth. Tower rumours, rooftop lies, claims of courage borrowed from other men's danger. You do not need to hear them in full. Dunwall breeds this kind of invention in men who fear being ordinary more than they fear being false. Another corpse carriage screams along the rail overhead and saves you from whatever he might have said next. He glances up, irritated by the interruption. You do not. You are listening to the air behind you, because there, no more than a hush, something shifts. Not near, not close enough to swear by, but enough. Your whole body answers before your mind does. Knees soften, breath halts. A fine tremor begins under your ribs and works outward. For one long instant you cannot turn your head. The cold at the back of your neck becomes so precise it feels like a fingertip resting there. Your companion keeps standing easy, half smirking, still occupied with himself. You hate him for that ease almost as much as you hate your own fear. When you do move, you move carefully, as if any sharp motion might invite notice from above. Nothing, only roofs, wet slate, iron balconies, chimneys exhaling blackness into fog. Still, the feeling remains, not thought, not imagination either. Presence without proof. The sense that the street has acquired another set of eyes, and that your own spine has already been measured for the place a blade might enter. You rub your thumb once against the leather of your scabbard, slow and soundless, grounding yourself in the dry grain of it. The action barely steadies you, but it gives the trembling somewhere to go. The other watchman tires of the silence in you. Men like him always do. Without your agreement, his little theatre curdles. He shifts away, muttering to himself, and drifts back toward the checkpoint light, where cruelty looks smaller under scrutiny. You do not watch him go. You keep your gaze on the street ahead, though the true danger, if there is one, would never come from straight ahead. The district settles into its old injuries. Fog folds low across the stones. A bottle breaks somewhere far off. Water ticks from a bent gutter. The corpse rail complains again in the distance, doing its endless work. You stand in the middle of all that machinery and smell and human spoil, and your own body becomes just another mechanism under strain, shoulders too tight, breath arriving shallow, pulse flickering high in the throat, every muscle waiting for a command that does not come. This is what paranoia really is, you think. Not wildness, not visions. It is the body learning the city too well. A shadow pauses too long and your lungs forget themselves. A roofline gathers fog and your hands go cold. A loose cable taps brick overhead, and your heart answers as if it has been called by name. You do not even need to believe in ghosts. Dunwall provides enough iron, enough hunger, enough half-seen movement to make a man into his own alarm bell. The watch passes slowly after that. No attack comes, no pale face appears on a rooftop, no steel unfolds in the dark. And still you cannot unclench. By the time the shift begins to thin toward morning, you feel flayed by vigilance. Your neck aches from holding still. Your eyes burn from searching black shapes for meaning. The wall of light's thin song has worn a groove into your skull. The dead continue overhead, patient as industry, and the living below keep to their shuttered rooms, coughing into sleeves, counting the hours until another order, another levy, another removal. You remain at your post because remaining is what men like you do. Not because you believe in it, not because the city deserves it, only because dawn has not yet arrived to relieve you, and in Dunwall that is reason enough for almost anything. You move from the mean lanes into one of Dunwall's high streets, and the city seems to rise around you in slow, stern layers of stone, soot and iron, each wall so tall it leans over the cobbles like an old judge. Salt-stained brick sits beneath fresh scars of industry. Ugly copper pipes slide along the faces of noble houses, thick as pythons, while iron plates are bolted across arches that once meant grace. Deep-set windows stare down through boards and grime. Slate roofs climb in black angles above stone gargoyles and smokestacks, and all of it hems you in, all of it makes you feel as if the street itself has closed a fist around you. You are glad to be away from the last post, glad to have left that brute there with his sour breath and his little joys, if a man like that can still feel joy. The straps of your armour drag at your shoulders, wet wool clings at the neck, and the cold sits under the skin with a patient, needling mercy. Whale oil drifts through the air in a thin blue tang, mixed with coal soot, damp lime, and the old river smell that never leaves Dunwall. Somewhere far off, beyond the walls and chimneys, a choffer murmurs through the mist. Somewhere else, from some unseen room, The plague gives one of its soft little sermons in the form of a cough. You pass a house that has been sealed shut in the usual fashion, boards nailed crosswise over the lower windows, a door chained and marked, the brick around it dark with rain and neglect. Yet one upper pane is cracked, and through that slit of glassless black you sense life still moving, if life is what it can be called after the sickness has rooted so far into a soul. Flies simmer in the dark beyond, a low and filthy hymn, and then the coughing comes again, close now, thick and wet and tired, more than one throat sharing the same ruined breath. You edge nearer than is wise, no closer than the sill, and let your gaze settle into the room's shadow. Shapes shift in there, human shapes, though only just, heads hanging at slant angles, limbs drawn in with a strange, listening stillness, rags dark with old seepage, skin gone wax pale where the light touches it, as if the flesh has forgotten warmth. One of them lifts its face toward you, and what arrests you is not the plague itself, nor the tremor in its jaw, nor the ruin in the eyes, but the remnant still trapped behind them. There is a person in there, a prisoner looking out from a face that can no longer shape words. Then it gives a small, aching shiver, and the others feel it. They gather at the window in a loose, dreadful press, not with haste, but with that swaying, sleep-starved hunger the plague leaves in them. Their fingers drag along the frame, their mouths part, their eyes hold yours, and you hate the men in the mess hall a little more, because there is more sorrow in these ruined stares than in all their laughter. Some souls are eaten by fever, some are hollowed out by wages, orders, and the promise of a warm bowl. Then the long metallic cadence comes through the street, steady as a sentence being read aloud. A tall boy advances at the far end of the avenue, rising above the fog on those impossible stilts, iron limbs jointed high and wrong, each step striking stone with a clack that seems to pass through the soles of your boots and into the teeth. It is less a man than a moving scaffold dressed in state cruelty. The figure mounted up there does not call out, does not hesitate, does not seem to look at any single window or door. They say the men inside the frame are fed tinctures until mercy leaves them. Looking up at that narrow torso braced in steel, at the mask, the harness, the tall bow resting like an instrument of ceremony, you believe it. Dunwall was not always made to crush the neck down into the chest. You can still feel the older city beneath this one, somewhere under the pipework and cabling, beneath the smoke and blue flare of whale oil. There were houses built for families, not searches, streets meant for commerce, not sweeps. Then came all this vast apparatus of power, towers, rails, lamps, bolts, compounds, orders from men who sit far from the coughing. Dunwall Tower looks over it all like a patient stone god, and the abbey mutters of sin while the city feeds its paw into flame, river, and plague. You are a small thing in it, a pair of boots, a blade, a neck left open to the cold. And always there is that feeling, that tender line of chill at the back of the neck, as if the dark itself has leaned close enough to breathe. The tall boy turns toward the boarded house. You stop before you know you have stopped. A flare hisses from the bow, then another. Fire blooms behind the boards with a muffled gulp of air, then an explosive crack that punches sparks out through the seams. The room you peered into a moment ago becomes a furnace of orange light and writhing shadows. The coughing breaks apart into sounds you will hear again in sleep. One shape beats at the window, another folds away into glare. The tall boy remains upright and still above it, severe as a monument, loosing death with the calm of a clerk stamping paper. Extermination, they call it. Clean work, civic work. Yet the ones in that room, even drowned in sickness, seemed nearer to the last of the human than the thing perched in iron over the street. You move on, because standing there changes nothing, and because if you watch any longer, you may feel your own mind begin to fray. The avenue narrows by degrees until the grand facades press inward and become a canyon of brick, slate, and soot-black stone. Balconies jut overhead like ledges in a cliff face. Cables sag between buildings. The mechanical thunder of the high street fades behind you, and the silence that replaces it is somehow heavier, as if the whole alley is listening. You lift your head. The rooftops sheer against the dim sky in jagged lines. Chimneys, gargoyles, railings, iron pipes, high window ledges silvered by weak light. For a breath you see nothing. Then the feeling arrives before the sight does. The old animal knowledge that eyes are resting on you from above. Your skin tightens under damp cloth. Cold air slides along the back of your neck like a thin blade laid there in warning. And there, for one thin instant, something interrupts the roofline. A figure, dark coat stirring in the wind, a pale, lifeless glint where a face should be, like porcelain or metal catching what little light the fog has not swallowed. No voice, no threat, only that still regard from above, and then less than that, a whisper of motion, a whoosh of displaced air, and the space is empty again. Empty, but not relieved. You do not shout, you do not run. You stand fixed in the alley with your hand near the hilt and your breath gone shallow, because some fears are too large for alarm. The plague is filth and fever and bad luck. This is different. This is intent moving through the city. This is the shadow with the mask, the ghost, the thing officers curse softly over drink when they think no low man is listening. When your body remembers how to move, it does so poorly. Every step after that feels borrowed. Then an officer's voice cuts through the lane, calling your name with the rough impatience reserved for men considered useful only when they are in motion. You answer at once. Rothwild Slaughterhouse, effective immediately. New orders, new post. Relief comes in a thin, guilty stream. Away from this street, away from the burning house, the iron giant, the watching roofs. Yet as you turn toward the road that will lead you there, your eyes keep lifting of their own accord. To eaves, to chimneys, to every ledge where a shadow might lengthen into steel. The city goes with you like a fever dream, whale oil in the air, soot on the tongue, and somewhere beyond sight the ghost keeping pace above. You leave the distillery district by degrees, as if the city is unwilling to release even one more tired soul from its damp grip, and the last of its plague fog follows at your heels in low white ribbons that drag across the stones. Then the street widens, the walls fall back, and Kaldwin's bridge rises before you in such colossal spans of iron and riveted shadow that your steps slow without your willing them to. It is not a bridge in the common sense, not some civic convenience laid over water for trade and ease, but a piece of state will made solid, a vast mechanical barrier slung across the river like an iron verdict. The girders thrust up into the colourless sky in severe black angles, latticed and cross-braced, until they resemble the inside of some impossible machine, the skeleton of an empire too large to bury. The river below sends up a cold spray that salts your lips and settles in the seams of your coat. The wind comes hard off the water and threads itself through the girders with a fierce, fluting whine, so that the whole structure seems to sing to itself in a language of strain, pressure, and metal fatigue. Blue light pulses through whale oil lines bolted along the bridge's inner bones, sealed glass canisters glowing like trapped spirits in rusted cast-iron housings. Thick black cables loop from terminal to terminal, humming with the low, constant force that Sokolov coaxed from the sea and taught the Empire to worship. Warning lamps blink in patient intervals. Copper housings sweat in the cold. Somewhere inside the bridge, unseen gears the size of houses turn with a grave and hidden labour. You stand there a moment, looking up until your neck aches, and feel very small, which is a feeling Dunwall has refined to an art. Anton Sokolov must have looked at a simple crossing and found it insufficient. That is the way of men like him. A ferry would move bodies, an ordinary bridge would move carts, but this immense industrial ironwork, this crown of pylons and rails and locked mechanisms, does more than carry traffic. It reminds every soul beneath it that power can be made visible, and that once it is visible, it enters the mind like weather. You do not understand how the blue current travels, or how the locking rails grip their carriage lines, or how an arc pylon gathers death in silence until a body wanders too near. You are not educated for such things. Men like you are only meant to march beside them, to trust the noise they make, to call it progress because a superior said the word first. You begin the crossing. The catwalk answers under your boots with a hollow iron note, and at once the river seems farther below than it had from the shore. Wind strikes harder at the centre span. Rain, thin as filings, sleets sideways and needles through wool and leather until your collar, your gloves, the straps under your arms all take on the same clammy weight. The metal grating beneath your feet shows the freezing black water in broken shapes. Looking down through it makes the stomach shift in its place. Barges move as dim hulks below, and the city spreads beyond them in layers of soot, smoke, and plague haze, all of Dunwall laid out like a sick animal breathing through congested lungs. The sound runs the length of the span, and through your ribs with it. You look up and catch the carriage only in fragments between trusses and cables, a dark utilitarian box creeping along magnetic locking rails with the stubborn assurance of state machinery. Everything here feels engineered to continue without love, without pause, without asking whether the lives beneath it can bear one more burden. The bridge was likely meant to stand as a symbol, the empire raised to its height, industry disciplined into elegance, nature subdued by intellect and iron. Yet from where you walk, soaked and cold above the river, it feels less like triumph than partition. It cuts the city into obedient sections. It controls who passes, who waits, who is screened by spotlights, who is measured by pylons, who is ash if they step wrong. A fortified line dressed as civic grandeur, a prison wall mistaken for a marvel. The farther you go, the less the city resembles streets and homes, and the more it resembles an affliction mapped over stone. Chimneys exhale blackness into fog, the roofs huddle in slate ranks, narrow alleys vanish in grime. Dunwall Tower stands off through the haze, austere and remote, as if untouched by the misery it oversees, and somewhere beyond sight the abbey keeps its severe counsel, while the city groans beneath whale oil, plague and decree. You think of the poor lanes you left behind, of sealed houses and infected breaths, of the tall boy rising on iron bird legs to burn the human residue out of a room. Then you think of this bridge, and of the hands that designed it, funded it, sanctified it, guarded it. The city devours from both ends, fever below, mechanism above. Between them, the ordinary body is no more than gristle in a set of immaculate teeth. Near the crest, the bridge changes character. The hard openness of the span narrows toward clustered works built directly into the upper structure, and the iron severity acquires a different kind of menace, more intricate, more intimate, less martial, and more inquisitive. Sokolov's quarter sits there like a warm stone shell fastened inside a forest of steel, lit from within by a softer yellow that only makes the surrounding cold seem harsher. Wires protrude from every angle of the adjoining buildings, thick bundles of cable and pipe feeding inward toward workshop doors, roof vents, copper coils, glass chambers, and engines whose purposes you cannot guess. Some crouch low and breathe steam. Some hum behind plated casings. Some stand upright on spidery supports, as if waiting to be introduced to weather. Their forms do not resemble tools in the old sense. They resemble thoughts that should have stayed in a man's head. You pass them with the caution one reserves for chapel relics and loaded weapons, bronze fittings, glass cylinders full of blue luminance, pressure gauges twitching under wet lamps, structural capacitors strung beside ribbed housings. Every surface shines with condensation, oil, or a thin chemical sheen. The air tastes of wet rust, ozone, and something faintly sweet beneath it, a burnt sugar edge that turns your stomach for reasons you cannot name. You hear pressure release and careful sighs. You feel vibration in your teeth. Technology infests this place the way mold takes bread, spreading into corners, feeding on damp, climbing over stone until the old building is only a host. Men on your wage are expected to salute it and move along. You do not know how a wall of light truly works. You know only what every guard knows. Twin copper pylons, a blue distortion between them, and death for whatever passes through when the current is live. You do not know how an arc pylon chooses its victim, or whether it chooses at all. You do not know how whale oil, lifted from the sea's great carcasses, becomes this invisible violence humming between metal posts. Baseline functions, the officers might call it if they wish to mock you. But what does it matter to a common man whether the miracle runs by coils, pressure, resonance, or prayer? The effect is the same. A line is drawn. A body crosses. The body is gone. Farther in, you pass the improvised jail exactly as it has been described by men who do not have to sleep beside such knowledge. A few survivors trapped between a wall of light and a half-broken building, kept for Sokolov and his experiments. A cure for the plague, the guards tell them. The phrase hangs in the air with the stale obedience of something repeated until no one has the strength to examine it. The people inside know better. You know better. Cure is a clean word for work that runs on fear, metal, and the steady delivery of desperate flesh. The Empire feeds Sokolov whale oil, brass, wire, guards, labourers, and human beings with the same administrative calm, because power does not distinguish much between fuel sources once the ledger has been balanced. You move on, but the thought stays with you. This is how the great machine turns, not by iron alone, not by invention alone, by class, by hunger, by the quiet agreement that some people may be rendered into use, while others write reports about the outcome. The Lord Regent holds the city with an iron fist, yes, but even a fist needs sinew, blood, and clever men willing to call cruelty necessary. The poor are scoured by plague, fenced by walls of blue fire, lifted into laboratories, tallied as if they were barrels, and then the same city speaks of salvation. Technology grows over Dunwall not as relief, but as a second plague, cleaner in shape, more elegant in language, and far more disciplined in its appetite. At last, the way turns downward. The high wind begins to ease as the span gives way to stair runs, lift shafts, dock approaches, and soot-blackened service structures descending toward Rothwild's district. The clean cold of the bridge thins out. Another atmosphere rises to meet you from below, dense and greasy, and with every level you lose the river's sharp salt for coal smoke, boiling blubber, hot iron, and that unmistakable blood-rich tang that settles under the tongue and refuses to leave. The stones sweat, steam gathers under lamps, chains creak somewhere in a slow, tired rhythm. You have crossed from the cold madness of systems and pylons into the warmer madness that feeds them. The slaughterhouse gates stand ahead at last, massive and soot-stained, framed by industrial ironworks darkened with labour and rain. You stop before them and feel the whole journey settle inside you. Behind you, the bridge still hums with blue force, and Sokolov's impossible machines continue their private liturgy. Ahead, the docks and bays labour on, turning whale flesh into the shining power that keeps all the rest alive. So this is the cycle: slaughter into oil, oil into current, current into walls, pylons, rails, lamps, orders, orders into bodies. You stand in it, listening, and know you have not escaped anything at all. You have only walked from one jaw of the city into the other. You stand your first shift deep inside Rothwild's slaughterhouse grounds with the feeling that you have not reported for duty so much as been fed into a mechanism. One more small moving piece slipped into its appointed groove, and the building receives you in the only language it knows: heat, blood, steam, iron. The air is so thick with it that each breath seems to leave a film along the throat. Boiled whale fat drifts through the hotter currents in sweet, rancid waves, while under it lies the hard mineral sting of fresh blood, the iron-heavy scent that settles into wool, skin, and memory. The concrete under your boots is slick with a red sheen gone black at the edges, scored by dragged hooks, cartwheels, and work soles, moisture pearls on every pipe and beam, steam vents in slow white exhalations from seams in the walls. Nothing in here is dry except the hearts of the men who designed it. You are posted where you can hear nearly everything and see almost nothing in full, which is its own form of cruelty. The whales come in whole, immense and dim through loading doors and hanging chains, lifted on meat hooks and industrial rigging with a solemnity that would suit a cathedral if cathedrals trafficked only in suffering. They never come out again. Instead, there begins the hidden liturgy of their undoing, the screech and grind of iron tracks, the slow drag of winches under impossible weight, the wet slap of severed blubber shifting from hook to hook, the relentless hydraulic complaint of pneumatic saws biting through what was once a living enormity in black water. The entire facility keeps time to that rhythm. Cut, hoist, drain, strip, boil, refine. You begin to understand that Dunwall's light is not merely powered by whale oil in the abstract. It is powered by this, by noise, by agony translated into industry, by a ceaseless scream of nature rendered useful by men with ledgers. Hours pass with no clean border between one and the next. You mark them only by pain in the shoulders, by the cold damp under your collar, turning hot and tacky in the blood bays, by the way your thoughts begin to move slower than the machinery around you. Now and then a cough catches in your chest, small and dry at first, easy enough to hide in the constant din, and you wipe your mouth on the back of your glove more from habit than alarm. No one here notices a cough. This city is built on them. A man could rattle from the lungs like loose bolts in a tray, and half the district would only call it weather. At one point you find a sight line through a half-open interior gap, little more than a slit between structural beams and a sliding door left careless by some butcher in haste, and through it you glimpse the true interior of the slaughter floor. Only a fragment, but enough. A crimson room, aprons soaked dark and shining, boots trampling through slick runoff and bits of pale biology that no one troubles to name. Butcherers move through it with the loose assurance of men who no longer distinguish labour from desecration. One hauls a flubbing knife in a red arm. Another shoulders past with a whale oil tank strapped to his back, feeding a buzzsaw that whines with a vicious, hungry pitch. They are not dressed as executioners, yet that is what they are, industrial executioners, ranked over labourers and prisoners alike, serving Rothwild's appetite with the old sailor loyalty of men who followed him from whaling decks into this inland charnel house. One of them notices your eye at the seam and gives you a look flat with contempt, as if you are the one trespassing on his trade. You step away. The slaughterhouse begins to seem like the city in miniature. things come in breathing and leave in crates, barrels, lamps, weapons, and policy. Nothing is permitted to remain itself. The whale becomes oil. The oil becomes current. The current becomes walls of light, arc pylons, warning lamps, security grids, magnetic locks, and all the stern blue assurances that men in Dunwall Tower call order. Somewhere higher in the world, Sokolov's inventions shine and hum and promise safety to those who can afford distance from their cost. Down here, the cost steams on the floor drains. Near your post, beyond a stretch of grimy interior yard and partition fencing, sits the makeshift prison the workers speak of in half voices when overseers are out of earshot. The strike men, dock labourers and line hands who asked for wages that matched the ruin of their bodies, who asked for rest from the excruciating hours, who forgot that the war machine is not allowed to sleep simply because flesh wears thin. Rothwild's answer was to have them arrested and held on sight, close enough to smell the fate of anything placed within his authority. They are gaunt behind the barrier, wrapped in old work clothes and fatigue, looking less like criminals than men already ghosting out of the world from hunger and dread. They notice you because you do not leer at them, do not prod the bars for sport, do not laugh when one of the overseers threatens the meat-packing district or the flooded district, as if both were merely different rooms in the same correctional house. So when the shift settles into one of its lower, grimier rhythms and attention wanders elsewhere, they begin to whisper to you, not loudly, not with drama. Human beings learn softness when hope is a thing that can be overheard and punished. Please, one says. Another tells you they have wives in Draper's Ward or children, or a room still waiting for them somewhere the plague has not yet opened its mouth. One swears he was only there to listen, not even to strike, just to stand among the others when they asked not to be worked to death for scraps. They speak of the meat-packing district as if it were a vanishing place, and of the flooded district with that special terror reserved for places no one present has seen but everyone has imagined. You have been there. You know the rot water, the collapsed masonry, the swarming hunger in the dark. You know what they fear, and because you know it, their words go in deeper than they should. For a few miserable breaths you picture it. Your hand on the lock, a slip of metal, a gate eased open, men moving quiet and low through steam and shadow. But the image will not hold, because other images arrive to crush it. Overseers on the catwalk, butcherers with cleavers and buzzsaws, City Watch eager to hurt a traitor as proof of their own loyalty, your own body dragged in irons to the very district these men whisper about. You are not brave enough to redeem anyone here, or perhaps bravery has nothing to do with it. Perhaps this place is simply built too well. Too many eyes, too many cruel men, too much iron arranged around too little mercy. So you do the only thing left to a decent coward. You do not mock them, and you do not promise what you cannot give. You look away slowly, throat tight, stomach twisting itself into a hard, small knot. One of them understands before the others. You can see it in the way his face settles, not into anger, but into the old knowledge that every system teaches eventually, that pity is not the same as rescue, and that a good man's weakness can wound as surely as a bad man's appetite. Their silence after that is worse than pleading. It leaves you standing with your complicity like a hot tool in your hand. The shift grinds on. More hooks, more steam, more muffled impacts from behind thick doors, more notes entered by men with clipboards who never touch the blood. At times you think the building is breathing through its vents and ducts, that the whole slaughterhouse is one vast organism feeding on the river and exhaling profit. Your own breaths have grown rougher by then, catching now and again in the chest before settling. Heat presses from within the bays. Your eyes sting. The skin beneath your armour crawls with old sweat and condensed grease. By the time the hours finally begin to loosen their grip, you are hollowed out enough to seek relief in cold. You step onto an exterior catwalk near the end of the shift, or perhaps it is more proper to call it an iron shelf, bolted to the side of the slaughterhouse, above a dark run of yard and dock. The night air hits you with such freezing clarity that for a moment it feels clean, though even here the fog carries river-damp coal ash and the faint sweet taint of boiled blubber. Below, chains sway over black water. Above, the roofline rises in broken, soot-stained angles, chimneys, vents, iron braces, loading cranes, wet slate. That is where you see it. At first, you take the shape for one more structural oddity, a pipe bend or hoist frame made strange by fog. Then it resolves into a stillness that does not belong to architecture. A figure stands against the moon-thinned mist on the high roof, perfectly held, as if waiting for the city to notice it. Dark strapped coat, heavy outline, a mask catching just enough dim light to show its hard mechanical planes and glassy glint. Not the pale face from the roofs before. This is something else, more industrial, more ritual. A hunter made of cloth, brass, and intent. You do not know the name for what you are seeing, only that no ordinary thief stands like that, and no ordinary killer wears such a face. The distance between you feels both enormous and intimate, bridged by nothing but cold air and the certainty that you have been measured. You cannot see the finer details, only the silhouette and the suggestion of layers. A long oilcloth or wool coat split for movement, shortened sleeves perhaps, heavier gloves, the burden of straps crossing the body, all arranged with a severe practical grace that makes your own issued uniform feel childish. The mask holds your gaze without expression. The whole figure seems to absorb the weak light instead of reflecting it. For one breath, two, perhaps three, the world narrows to that roof edge. Then the shape is gone. No leap. No scramble down slate. No loose shower of grit. Only that strange, sweeping absence, as if the air itself folded and took the figure with it. You remain where you are, hand fixed near the hilt, every small hair along your neck lifted by a cold, far deeper than weather. The slaughterhouse below you, so absolute in its routines a moment earlier, now feels exposed. Not less terrible, more, as if all this blood and iron, all these guards and butcherers and locks have been seen from above and found wanting, as if the building itself is being studied for its weaknesses by forces that move through Dunwall's upper dark with the silence of judgment. Shouts and orders come from the other end of the grounds. The prisoners escaped. No clue how. Maybe they found a way out. Maybe some other guard helped them. Someone willing to risk themselves to help others. Memories are more than enough to keep you in line. You saw them, backs facing you as their legs blur into haste. The only creatures to escape Rothwild's slaughterhouse. Not all, of course. A few make it, but you watch as two escapees are caught by the butcherers. Crashing into one grim fate that is all too common for these grounds, one you knew would happen, but it didn't prepare you for the sights, crimson pouring from one man to another bloody apron. Screams turned into gargles, and ultimately, silence. When you return to your post, the heat feels fouler than before. Rumours begin in the days that follow, as rumours always do. First in mutters between shifts, then in guarded statements from officers trying and failing to sound unconcerned. Bundry Rothwild has vanished from his office. No proper explanation, no public transfer. Just gone, the way powerful men have been going of late. Some say assassinated. Some say taken. Some say the same spectres haunting roofs and bridges have started culling the Lord Regent's inner circle one by one. The High Overseer has fallen from grace. Anton Sokolov has disappeared. The Pendletons are gone. The Boyles' money has dried to a mean trickle. Every name comes with a lowered voice and a glance toward the nearest superior. Then the order reaches you, plain and graceless as all orders do. Report to Dunwall Tower, effective immediately. No one says why men like you are needed there now. They do not have to. Paranoia travels faster than any choffer. If the Lord Regent is pulling more soldiers into the tower, then his hold is slipping, and the city knows it even if the proclamations do not. You stand with the summons in hand and feel no relief, only the weary knowledge that Dunwall keeps moving you from one throat to another. First the streets, then the bridge, then the slaughterhouse, now the tower itself, where all the fear at the top of the city has begun to clench inward. You gather your things, what little there is to gather, and cast one last look over Rothwild's district. The soot, the hooks, the stacked barrels of luminous oil, the stained walls sweating steam into the dark. The whole place hums with the same old appetite. It consumes whales, workers, prisoners, wages, sleep and conscience, and still demands more. Behind you, somewhere high along the roofline and fog, you cannot help imagining masked eyes watching the yard in silence, waiting for the hour to come. You leave with the taste of iron still in your throat, and the city goes on feeding itself. You stand in Dunwall Tower as if you have been set there by a careful hand, another dark figure placed against a wall of pale grandeur, so the room can remember what power expects from the men who keep it. The corridor is long and high, and finished in such stern refinement that it hardly seems part of the same city you have spent your life serving. Grey marble runs beneath your boots in broad, spotless plains, veined like old ice, with polished wood set into the floor in rich dark borders that drink the low light and return it as a muted sheen. Tall carved figures rise from the walls in white stone, men and women from some lineage of importance you do not know, and were never meant to know, their calm faces kept cleaner than most living souls in Dunwall. Red drapes fall in heavy lengths between the pillars, deep and lustrous, the colour of old blood kept warm by privilege, and every brass fitting, every trim of gilt, every polished surface seems to exist in defiance of the city below, as if plague, soot, and grief have been turned away at the threshold by money alone. A cough catches you before the thought can settle. It starts low, a dry scrape deep in the chest, then rises hard enough to bend you at the ribs. Heat blooms under the plates of your uniform, a mean inner fire trapped beneath damp cloth, leather straps and metal fittings. You turn your face aside and brace one hand against the marble. The stone is so cold, so smooth, so clean that it feels almost cruel against the fever in your palm. For a moment, your sight loses its edges. The corridor blurs into pale light, dark, trim, red cloth. You wait until the fit passes, swallowing down the raw taste in your throat, and lift your head slowly so no officer drifting by might see too much weakness in the motion. The illness has moved further in you now. It lives in the lungs with a dry patience. It warms the blood in ugly waves and leaves a faint trembling in the fingers when you hold them too still. You feel it in the heaviness behind the eyes, in the careful way you have begun to draw breath, as if the chest were a room with less space than it used to have. A few weeks ago, you might have called it a chill, a barracks cough, the sort of thing men carry through winter and lose again by spring. Dunwall does not allow such innocent explanations any longer. Too much has been breathed in. Too many names have already gone soft and distant. Across from your post hangs the portrait, large enough to command the passage even in silence. The Lord Regent stands elevated within it, severe and composed, his posture arranged with the kind of confidence only painters and tyrants can preserve without effort. The line of him rises above the figures near his feet, above the suggestion of the watch itself, as if he has placed himself not only over the city, but over the men who bleed to hold it together. Beneath him, the field of red feels less like decoration than admission. It pools around the lower portion of the image with a stately richness, and the eye cannot help but read blood into it. Blood spread out into symbol, blood lifted into ornament, blood made respectable by a frame and a polished wall. You have seen the image elsewhere in smaller forms, on walls, in offices, in those guarded rooms where men discuss order, while others scrape it from the cobbles with brushes and bare hands. Here it has its proper shrine. You look at that painted height and think how far your own years in the watch have carried you without ever lifting you. From the damp sleep stink of the barracks, where wool never dries and a man's thoughts grow mould before morning, to the checkpoints where blue light sings and frightened people beg in the rain. From the long iron span of Kaldwin's bridge, with its dizzying airs and mechanical groans, where the city seems to hang between sea and smoke like a body on the rack, to the slaughterhouse where blood, tallow and whale oil mingle until the very soul recoils from the air, you have been sent through every seam of Dunwall's misery and told it was duty. You have stood above floodwater and below chimneys, in alleys slick with refuse and halls lined with polished brass, and nowhere has anyone asked what such service has made of you. The city takes the answer for granted. It grinds, and men are what get ground. Here in the tower, the suffering becomes abstract. That is what unsettles you most. The walls do not confess the streets that feed them. The marble does not remember the poor. The carved faces stare outward in blank serenity, while whole districts cough themselves toward the grave. You think of the woman at the checkpoint, wet and dark with street filth, asking only for passage, for shelter, for a little safety for herself and the child, waiting elsewhere in the cold. You think of the ugly sort from the mess hall, the ones who would admire these polished halls not for their beauty but for their plunder, already measuring in their minds what could be pocketed, pried loose or sold. You think of the wretches in the slaughterhouse, skin-salted by labour and fear, who might stand here in mute wonder if they were allowed, seeing at last what their flesh and fatigue help sustain. All those lives held down so these floors can shine, all that hunger turned into gloss. Another cough stirs, softer this time, and you hold it in your teeth until the wave passes. Sweat cools beneath your collar. Somewhere high in the tower a mechanism hums through the walls, refined and distant, whale oil turned to gentility. Even the machines sound expensive here. Then the speakers awaken. The sound hits the corridor so hard it seems to shake the drapes where they hang. It rushes along the marble, climbs the pillars, and comes back at you from every polished surface in fractured echoes. For one brief instant you expect the usual official notice, some decree about curfews, plague policy, ration discipline, the dry commands that drift over the city like soot. Instead, the voice that fills the tower is unmistakable, proud even through the crackle, clipped with authority and self-belief, and what it says stills the blood in you more completely than fever ever could. The Lord Regent's voice rolls from the speakers. You have heard that voice pour through Dunwall for so long, it has worn a place in you, issuing decrees, cautions, ration laws, all in that hard official measure that leaves no room for any other soul to answer. Yet this is not that voice, not fully. Something in it has gone soft and inward, as if the words have slipped free before they were dressed for the street, and now you are hearing the bare shape of the man beneath the office. He speaks low with the sound of a sinner shut in a booth at the Abbey, with the hush of one laying out a secret he had meant to carry in silence, and the strangeness of it sends a thin chill along the back of your neck, because power is meant to sound cold and certain, and this sounds like a door easing open into a dark room. He speaks of the plague as if it were a thing used, chosen, directed. He speaks of the poor as if they were brushed to be cleared from a road. He speaks of the Empress and of murder with the chill distance of a man arranging furniture. Each sentence falls into the corridor with the impossible weight of truth too long denied. The words strike the marble and return thinner, yet no less monstrous. There is no room left for rumour, no comfort left in not knowing. The sickness, the rats, the sealed houses, the desperate checkpoints, the Mould in the rations, the funerary carts, the weeping in darkened rooms, the bodies taken before dawn. All of it has been wrapped, somewhere near the top, in intention. Your fever burns hot, yet the rest of you goes cold. You look to the other guards posted along the corridor. These are tower men, crisp in bearing, chosen for visible discipline, the sort who wear obedience like an extra polished plate. You have seen such faces hold steady through panic and execution alike. Now, that steadiness gives way. One stares forward as if struck blind. Another shifts, almost imperceptibly, and his mouth slackens open. A third lowers his eyes, then lifts them quickly as though afraid of what the floor might tell him. The fanatical set of the jaw, the rehearsed posture, the faith in rank and command, it all loosens in the same breath. What remains is not rebellion. It is disbelief so deep it resembles nausea. And beneath it, in you, something older and more intimate breaks loose. Your family died while orders kept you elsewhere. Not in one grand tableau, not in a way history will mark, only in that mean, common fashion Dunwall has made ordinary, alone, unattended, overtaken while duty pinned you to another street, another gate, another shift. You did not stand beside them. You stood watch for men who used your back and your silence to build this ruin. You learned to obey because the city punishes refusal, and because decent men are taught early that survival sometimes looks too much like surrender. You told yourself there were wheels too large to stop, evils too high to touch, that a guard at the edge of power could do little but endure. Yet the voice in the speakers makes a mockery of every patient excuse. The evil had a mouth, it had an office, it had portraits and carpets and polished banisters, it signed decrees while the city starved and coughed. The confession ends, but its shape remains in the air like smoke. No one speaks. Even the corridor seems to hold itself in a strained, expensive hush. Then the great doors at the far end of the hall open with violent force, and a squad of armed officers advances through the polished length of the passage. Their boots strike the floor in hard, measured rhythm. They move in formation, faces fixed, hands close to weapons, all ceremony stripped down to purpose. And there, held in the middle of them, is the man from the portrait. Without the grandeur of paint, he seems smaller. The regimental finery has gone from him, or enough of it that the illusion has failed. He is bound in heavy iron shackles that drag his arms into an awkward, graceless angle. The proud stillness of the portrait has turned to a cramped agitation in the flesh. Panic has eaten the composure from his features. Humiliation clings to him more plainly than any coat ever did. He looks less like the shape that ruled the city, and more like what the city produces in all ranks eventually, a frightened body learning that walls and titles cannot always hold. You pull yourself straighter, though your hands tremble with fever. Your grip tightens on your weapon until the leather bites the skin. They bring him past your post at close enough range for you to see the sweat at his temple, the pallor at the mouth, the frantic little dart of his eyes. And what rises in you then is not relief. It is rage, pure, clean, ruinous rage, so sudden in its fullness that for a breath you do not recognize it as your own. You think of taking your blade and laying all those dead and dying years at his feet, in the only language men like him ever forced the city to understand. You think of red on marble, of justice made bodily, of making pain answer pain. The thought feels hot and sharp and frighteningly easy. In that instant, you understand something ugly about the men from the barracks, from the alleys, from every place where cruelty has been allowed to ripen. Humanity can thin in a heartbeat. A wound can ask to become a weapon. You do not move, but the wanting itself leaves a mark. Then the fit passes, and what remains is worse. He is pathetic, not absolved, not diminished in guilt, only pathetic. A small man hauled along by consequences too late to save anyone. No triumph settles in your chest, no grand repair begins. The plague is still in your blood. The city is still broken from cellar to rooftop. Good men are still dead, weak men still armed, hungry women still turned away at gates, children still waiting in cold rooms for hands that may never return. One tyrant fallen does not clear the rot from the beams. A cough tears through you again, and this one brings a taste of copper. You keep your mouth closed, swallow slowly, and feel the bitter trace linger at the back of the tongue. The officers march him on. Shackles clink, leather creaks, the red drapes hang unmoved. The marble figures keep their blind regard. Somewhere beyond these gleaming halls waits Coldridge, waits judgment, waits whatever ceremonial end men of station reserve for one another. It feels very far from the streets. It feels almost unreal. The echoes fade by degrees. First the iron report, then the footfalls, then the last strained movement of the procession. What remains is the clock, patient and indifferent, measuring out the hall's silence into equal parts. You stand where you were placed, fevered and upright, another servant of a wounded city keeping watch over surfaces too clean for truth. The portrait still hangs on the wall. The drapes still fall in dark red lengths. The marble still shines. Yet the tower feels changed now, not because it has been purified, but because one lie has been stripped from it, and the bare stone underneath looks colder than before. You draw a careful breath and feel how little ease it brings. Below, Dunwall goes on coughing. You remain in Dunwall Tower because a man in a finer coat says you remain, and then you leave because that same kind of man says you leave, and in the end it feels like the same order spoken through a different mouth. The halls still smell of polish, old smoke, wet wool, and that faint metallic sting of whale oil that seeps from lamps and security devices as if the whole tower were lit by a cold blue vein beneath the stone. Your boots whisper over mosaic floors, over runners gone dark with tracked rain, over places where power has changed hands so many times that the stones seem to remember no name at all. Havelock, they say, Lord Regent now, or acting as one, or whatever title men use when they need others to kneel without asking why. It means little to you. Dunwall never lacks for titles, nor for thin men with sharp voices who mistake command for virtue. One tyrant slumps, another straightens his collar. One seal is broken, another pressed into wax. Meanwhile, the same damp creeps into your gloves, the same ache settles in your knees, the same night watch waits beneath the same failing sky. You have long since ceased to imagine that any transfer of rank will soften the labour of a common guard. The city grinds on, only the hands on the lever change. You stand with the other blue coats while new orders spill out in hurried fragments. Search the Hound Pit's pub. Find whoever remains there. Secure the grounds. Report movement. The words fall in that clipped official rhythm meant to make confusion resemble purpose. None of you are told much, and that, more than anything, feels familiar. Officers never like to share what they fear. They would rather send 10 ordinary men into the dark and call it discipline than admit they do not understand the shape moving in front of them. So you go. The rain has eased by the time you reach the pub district, leaving the stones slick and dark, the air rinsed clean in one breath and fouled again in the next by soot, standing water, and the thin medicinal sweetness that clings to plague-haunted places. The Hound Pit waits in a weary stillness beside the river, its yard half mud, half stone, with the workshop rising nearby, and the little scatter of outbuildings and fencing holding the last of the damp like old cloth. Whale oil lamps spread their blue-white shimmer over puddles, and every reflection trembles when the wind moves over the yard. The weather is almost kind. That feels more unsettling than the usual cold. Your fever is with you now in full. It glows inside your ribs like a hidden furnace, dry and secretive, while the outer air strokes your face with a cool hand. You keep your breath measured when others are near. You swallow the roughness in your throat. You angle your head when you need to cough so it seems like nothing, only a little clearing of the chest after rain. You have been searching for extra elixir for days in whispers and sidelong talk, in corners where desperate men trade lies before coin, and you have found nothing but shrugs, hoarded bottles, and the hard little smile people wear when scarcity has made them cruel. You do not blame them. Not really. A man with enough elixir to spare would not be standing where you are standing. The pub itself bears the hush of a place that once held ease. You can feel it in the warped wood under your palm, in the worn threshold smoothed by 1,000 ordinary crossings, in the little sheltered spaces where laughter must once have gathered before the plague turned every gathering into a risk and every stranger into a calculation. There are signs of life that do not belong to soldiers. Old kitchen scents sunk into the beams, the ghost of yeast and stew, soot above a hearth, chairs shaped by use rather than storage. It unsettles you more than blood would. A room that remembers peace can make a man grieve faster than a room built for harm. You find drawings tucked where rain has not reached them. A little girl's hand, surely. Small lines, hopeful lines, a house, a figure, a son that does not belong to Dunwall and yet insists upon itself all the same. The paper is softened at the edges, the charcoal smudged in one corner, but the innocence remains whole enough to sting. You hold the image for a moment longer than you mean to. For one slow breath the city loosens. You remember, not clearly, only by sensation, that there had once been hours in life that were not given over to dread, before the plague, before the red stains in alley gutters, before men in office taught the rest of you how cheaply a life could be spent. Then the yard changes. At first it is only a shift in the air, a faint metallic pressure against the tongue, as if a storm were forming inside the bones of the workshop. Then comes the mechanism itself, a remote whirring rise, the articulate click of moving metal seeking alignment, the stern, insect-like precision of a machine made to find flesh. High above, the arc pylon wakes. You lift your head. Its shape looms against the wet dark, a tall metallic pillar crowned with a rotating head, all iron intent and engineered malice, fed by whale oil that burns its cold blue life through canisters and coils. The sound it makes is not loud at first, only a layered ticking, a tracking sound, measured and calm, which is somehow worse than alarm. Alarm suggests panic. This suggests certainty. A custom device, someone mutters somewhere behind you, but you hardly hear it. What you hear is the little crackle in the damp, the gathering hiss, the blue charge knitting itself into being above the workshop roof. The canisters glow with that luminous whale oil blue, not warm, never warm, but vivid and surgical, a colour that makes the night around it seem bruised. The rain on the stones catches that light. The yard becomes a shallow sea of cold fire. The world becomes blue, not bright in the manner of sunlight, not holy, not cleansing. It is whale oil blue, harsh and total, filling your eyes, your teeth, the hollows of your hands, striking through muscle and marrow with a force too complete to resist. For an instant you feel your whole outline written in lightning. Then there is no yard, no order, no rank, no duty, only the long inward fall. You never see the one they whisper about. No masked face turns toward you. No legend resolves itself into a man. If there is a ghost in the yard, it is elsewhere, beyond your reach, moving through the folds of history where common guards are never invited. You are only a body in a blue coat standing in the path of a decision made above your station. You see what follows, though never with a living man's place in it. You sense officers brought low in rooms where authority had once seemed permanent. You feel the shift in the city's breathing when their grip fails. You witness a child restored to a place built to swallow children whole, and somehow not swallowed. Emily Kaldwin, small in the vast machinery of legacy, and yet enough to turn the gaze of the city away from the dark age that had wrapped itself around her name. You understand, then, how history chooses its lanterns. It raises a few figures into the light and lets the rest of you sink into the ash below. The Empress, the child heir, the new rulers, the shadow with the mask. These are the names that survive, not the grunts in damp barracks with mildew in their blankets and old fear in their lungs. Not the men who took their soup in silence beside crooked, sour faces in the mess hall. Not the scarred man from the flooded district with his rough stories and his tired half-smile, speaking as if memory itself were a ration to be shared. Not the guard who would sell his own mother for a little coin and a softer post. Not the desperate mother turned away at a checkpoint, her voice thinning in the rain while duty hardened around your answer like frost. Not the prisoners on Kaldwin's bridge, pale and drawn, their faces lifted through iron like lambs already sensing the blade. Not the labourers in the slaughterhouse wanting only a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, while blood, brine and hot tallow made a sermon of misery in the air. Not the coughing souls burned out of rooms by tool boys while the city called the smoke necessary. Not you. You passed through all of it. Barracks, distillery lanes, bridge spans, slaughterhouse floors, Dunwall Tower, and its polished indifference. You carried the same flesh through every chamber of the city's appetite, and every place took something. A little sleep, a little mercy, a little faith that service and honour were neighbouring things. By the end, even your paranoia had become a kind of weary wisdom. Cold air at the back of the neck, the sense that any shadow might gather itself into steel, the habit of listening for the whoosh of disturbed air, for the skittering of rats where rats should not be, for the heavy click of metal unfolding somewhere unseen. You never knew whether the masked assassin was a man, a rumour, or death teaching itself to walk upright through Dunwall. Perhaps it never mattered. For men like you, the difference between myth and murder is often only the time it takes for the body to cool. Consciousness returns by fragments. Motion first, a rough, relentless rocking, then the rails, the shriek and grind of them, metal complaining over distance, a sound so sharp it seems to scrape the inside of your skull, then smell, sickly sweet, fouled by rot, damp cloth, old blood, and the stale human heat of too many failing bodies pressed into too little air. You know it before your eyes open. Some part of you has always known it. The plague carrier. You force your lids apart. Another face sways inches from your own. A man, if the word still applies. Skin waxen and ruined, mouth slack, eyes leaking that dark, constant weeping that seems too heavy to come from a living body. He moans, low and torn, not speaking, never speaking, only sounding the last ragged instrument left in him. Then you understand your own position in the carriage, the rails carrying you high above Dunwall toward the district where the city hides what it no longer wishes to name. Your limbs answer poorly. Cramp seizes muscle after muscle. Your hands feel distant. Your chest is a furnace lined with needles. The infection is no longer a private ember you can hide behind a straight pack and a guarded breath. It has risen, taken room, made its claim plain. You close your eyes because there is nothing else to do, and for a little while you welcome any ending that will hold still long enough to take you. When you wake again, days have worn away. The uniform is gone, no blue coat, no belt, no sign that the watch ever counted you among its number. They stripped what could be used and cast off what could not. That too feels natural in its way. The city moves on from its spent men with admirable efficiency. You lie in the damp stone underside of a ruined place near Blackwater, somewhere in the flooded district where foundations sweat and every surface keeps a chill in it. The smell is old water, mould, rust, rat filth, and the low, sweet rot of bodies not yet fully surrendered. Dripping echoes through the dark in patient intervals. Far off, the city lives without you. You had feared this quarter from the beginning, and now you belong to it. Your eyes burn, then loosen, then weep. Not tears, something thicker, warmer, darker, tracing down your face in slow, relentless streams. Your throat shapes no language anymore. When you try to call out, what leaves you is a low, agonized moan, the sound of a self trapped behind failing doors. Your mind does not vanish all at once. That is the cruelest part. It frays, it loops, it brightens in fever and dims in confusion. One thought remains whole while the next breaks apart before it reaches its ending. You remember your own name 1 hour and lose it the next. You feel the man you are sitting behind your eyes like someone imprisoned in another room, listening through the wall. So you sit in the ruin and shiver. Your skin is wrong on you. Your bones feel near the surface. Your breathing rasps wetly in the gloom. The plague has won with no triumph in it, only process, only the slow completion of a pattern Dunwall has rehearsed too many times, and yet even here, with your thoughts loosening and your body entering its final service to misery, some dim ember of witness remains. You feel the city above, still turning. You feel the abbey murmuring of sin. You feel Dunwall Tower lifting its walls against memory. You feel the river washing soot past stone. You feel the last lights in windows, where survivors lean close to one another and speak softly, as if softness itself might keep the dark from thickening. You sense, far away and nearly beyond your understanding, that the sickness which made weepers of so many may not be eternal after all. That somewhere, in hidden rooms and guarded hope, hands still work toward a remedy. Not for you. Too late never loses its meaning merely because hope exists elsewhere. But for someone, for some child still drawing suns on scraps of paper, for some mother not yet turned from a gate, for some labourer, some prisoner, some tired soul in a blue coat, who has not yet felt the cold air gather at the back of the neck. And that is the last tenderness left to you. Not salvation, not remembrance, only the faint receding sense that Dunwall might one day wake from this long fever, and that beneath all the soot and whale oil and sorrow, there had always been something in it worth saving,